Let's get started. Today is the third installment on generative AI for lawyers, empowering solos and small firms. Um, Very excited to have you here. And we're going to be talking today about part three, which is AI in client interaction and legal services delivery. Um, it's not going to be really demonstrations of what to do in each particular opportunity for providing AI and client interaction or legal services delivery, but we're going to talk about some of the ideas. We're going to talk about the framework, and we're going to dig into that. So if you don't know, I'm Tom Martin. I'm the founder of LawDroid, and LawDroid is a company dedicated to supercharging your law firm with AI legal assistance and helping you to become an irreplaceable lawyer. The agenda for today is we're going to talk about utilizing AI for client intake and communication, how to personalize your legal services with the aid of AI. Third, how to use it in terms of case management and workflows, how to enhance your actual client engagement and satisfaction with AI tools so you can go beyond just the one-to-one model, and some practical tips for how to implement it. And we also have a couple of downloadable files that I'll be able to share with you. Just want to hear back from you towards the end that once you see them, whether or not you'd like a copy of it. So we'll take a look at that too. I'd like to recap this. We talked a little bit about this in the last part, but trends in law firm use of generative AI. As I shared last time, lawyers are at the top of the list of professions most worried about AI. This survey done by an AI customer service AI platform, DevRev, they basically looked for Google search terms to find out, how many searches were going on about AI replacing this job or this set of tasks that's part of this job. And lawyers were number one, followed by artists, accountants, doctors, and data scientists. I'm kind of surprised that, if the survey was taken this past week or the past couple of weeks, it probably would have developers high up on the list because they've gotten some pretty bad news. Aside from like the number of layoffs that are happening right now in big tech, there's also there was a recent launch of a company that is called Cognition. I don't know if you've heard about that, but they have come out with their own AI, which is not just you tell it what to do and it does it, but you tell it what to do, it comes up with its own plan of action, executes against every step of that plan, and can pretty much do the job unaided. So that's a bit of a scary prospect for developers there. But again, as I pointed out last time, I think it opens up opportunities because there'll be more projects that can be worked on. And I think by increasing the supply of talent, by making this AI available, there'll be more projects require greater supervision, and there'll be a demand for even more projects based on that. So there is a feedback loop that could benefit the industry. 82% of legal professionals see the potential of generative AI in their work. Some of the use cases: drafting, summarization, legal research. But one thing that's kind of left off from this is how we actually use it in communicating with clients, which is what we're going to get into today. And how do we personalize things? This is me saying that lawyers, I don't think there's the luxury anymore of kind of pushing away from the table, and that we need to adapt to make ourselves irreplaceable. And this, I think, from Kat Moon, she makes a great point because she says that, this whole thing about lawyers who use AI will replace lawyers who don't use AI. Okay, great. But it's much more likely that lawyers who use actual human traits like empathy and curiosity and collaboration will actually replace lawyers who don't employ those just really human traits and tools. And so especially, and this part I left out just because of the length of the quote, but she also mentioned that, when AI becomes table stakes, that phrase, but when it becomes something that's just the background of everything that we do, will that really be a different differentiator? Not really. It will kind of sink into the background. But the one thing that we can still continue to employ and work on is being human, being there, being present for our clients. And Jordan Furlong also wrote about this, that we will still always have the ability to provide peace of mind to our clients, to guide them, and to be there with them through their journey. Because, if somebody's turning to a lawyer, there's probably a pretty stressful situation, or at least it's one that is completely out of the ordinary and sometimes anxiety provoking for our clients. And so that's ultimately what we could still provide. And then what we're going to try to do during this session is to tame the wild beast, take it from the fear of this, AI Terminator, to a very helpful guide that will collaborate with us, improve what we do, and give us more time back so that we can have more of a life and not just work all the time. Okay, so let's talk about client intake and communication. When we look at the different opportunities of how we can use AI, I think too many times we're focused on just numbers. We're focused on how more efficient we can be. And there certainly is a place for the objective, and we're going to talk a bit about that. But there's also a lot of room for the subjective. There's a lot of room for clients' perception of us and their ability to get information that they need. As we all know, the number one bar complaint is lack of communication from attorneys. So being able to increase that would be extremely helpful. The client journey, though, it starts with that initial contact with their law firm. So when clients reach out to us, are we available? For the most part, lawyers are kind of hard to get a hold of. People try to call us, or they try to, chat with us online, and it's difficult to get somebody to answer. And people, what do they do if that happens? They just move on. One of the worst conversations that you could have with a potential new client is to call them and hear that they've hired someone else, right? Isn't that probably one of the most, it's a big letdown. And so you don't want to be in that position. You want to be able to get there just in time. And because we can't be in all places at once, AI chatbots are a really great way of being there when we can't be. It could help with initial screening, so one thing could be that you put in a list of questions that are relevant to your practice that you would normally ask somebody to find out, are they a qualified lead? Is this someone that you would even want to have a conversation with? It may be, are they even open to paid consultations, right? And you share with them how much the consultation is going to cost. Walk them through a series of qualifying questions. And one thing to keep in mind with chatbots is that any vendor you look at, you want to make sure that it's not a cookie cutter solution. You want to see that there's an ability to customize it for your specific preferences, your specific questions that you have based upon your practice and your years of tuning it in for what makes sense for you. If they're going to limit you in what you can ask and how many questions and how you can build some logic behind it to disqualify people, you probably want to find another vendor. In addition to the qualification steps for initial screening for a lead, you would also want to provide them with information. So a great strategy in building that relationship, and that's one of the number one things I like to emphasize here, is that we also get stuck in not just the objective numbers, but also talking about the business logic of capturing a lead, qualifying the lead, converting the lead. But we need to remember these are people, and these are people that are in a difficult circumstance, and they desperately want to get answers to their questions. And I think if you present yourself as someone who is available to answer these questions, even if it's through a generative AI or any type of artificial channel, they're going to see you as someone, they're going to see you as a resource, and you want to be viewed as a resource that's valuable. For example, we have built a chatbot, at least actually a couple of chatbots for Patrick Palace, who has a workers' compensation practice in Tacoma, Washington. And one of them provides answers to people's questions about workers' comp. What is workers' compensation? Where do I file my claims? Does this kind of injury qualify for workers' compensation? There's a number of questions that you can ask that could get answered. There's also another chatbot that we have for him that provides microservices. So some things that maybe a workers' compensation lawyer would not want to do because it's just too small for them. An example of that is sometimes workers need a letter from their doctor that links the injury to work. Pretty simple. But having a lawyer type up that letter and just do that, it's not worth their time. So we have automated that, and it's a microservice, is what we call it, that these potential new clients can access to create a letter for themselves. Now, Patrick's firm is not making money off of that. It's a free service that he provides. But the soft sell underneath everything is that if it gets more complicated than this, Patrick's firm is there to help. And I think that creating things like this for initial screening, for providing value through generative AI Q&A is very, very, it's good business, but it's also goodwill. Conversational AI and natural language processing is that thankfully now we could do this in a much more natural way with generative AI. So instead of it solely being the conditional, if you pick yes, then you go down this route. No, you go down that route. You can also have people more fluidly share their story. So if you've had any experience with clients, as I'm sure you've had, you know that they love to tell their story. Sometimes you can't stop them from telling their story. They'll go on and on about everything that is completely irrelevant to the legal issues, as we know, and sometimes hit upon some legal issues. But that's just the human element of it, that they need to unload and share the story. Now, traditionally, when it's come to a conditional logic approach, it doesn't really lend itself to like press yes down this route or no, right? It's more complicated than that. Well, with generative AI, what it allows you to do is you could use it also for analysis, not just for generating stuff, not just generating images, not just generating, here's a response, but also to analyze what the person is saying. And so, for example, on the Lodroid platform, what you could do, and there's other platforms you can do this on, you take the input, so the story that somebody's telling the bot, and run it through a layer where we've provided a very detailed prompt to the AI to break down what the person's saying, not only into a summary, it could do that, but also to extract certain information and to categorize it for different variables that we normally we'd ask them. An old-fashioned way to think of it is you ask them a question, you put the answer, question, answer, right? And then you have like a worksheet that you fill out when you talk to a lead. It's the same idea, but you're using the AI for that so that it takes in the story as the input, and then it knows that it needs to identify the legal topic. So this person, they're talking about a car that hit them when they're crossing, the crossing on a crosswalk. Okay, this is a personal injury case. And it's also, a vehicle versus pedestrian case. So it could categorize it. And it could also give additional points of reference, like the date that it happened, who else was involved, what kind of car, and all of this it could extract from the story that the person told. Now, it won't be everything because not everything is relevant, but you can extract what is relevant. And the beauty of this is that this all happens automatically by the AI having that conversation. And then you could port that into, whatever case management system is appropriate. AI can also be useful for scheduling. There used to be a bot called X.AI that you would be able to essentially copy on your emails, and it would work to, work out that back and forth about what dates for a group they'd be available for a joint meeting. That said, I wouldn't discount a good old-fashioned AI with conditional logic in the form of something like Acuity scheduling or Calendly. Now, it's not conversational AI, but it does a good job of integrating with different systems and gives people a very easy point-and-click solution to find a time that you're available. But there are, solutions that employ the conversational approach as well. Automated reminders, follow-up, and status updates. One thing I love about my dentist, and there's not a lot of things, don't like the bill or actually getting work done when I have to, but they're very good about regimenting the follow-ups and reminders that I really think lawyers would benefit from. And again, it's not necessarily generative AI, but the good old-fashioned AI of programming an automated, day before reminder, a follow-up thereafter to see if everything went well and give us a great rating if it did go well, is extremely important to keep things on track. Beyond that, it's extremely important to give the psychological impression and make that good impression on the client that they're being handled, that they're taken care of. And I don't know about you, but I really appreciate that from the dentist because I have so much else going on that for them to be mindful that I might have a lot going on and a little hand-holding helps. So I think our clients get the same impression and they would find it very helpful, especially when they got a lot going on and the meeting might be during the week when they have work to attend to. The status updates, now this is where it gets interesting. Like you could bring generative AI into this in that having your AI integrated with your cases. So one example that is coming up in, I think it's July, maybe June, but Clio, for example, is going to employ its AI called Duo. And Duo is going to be, of course, having the benefit of the case information. And I don't know if they're making it available externally to clients, but it will be able to answer questions for a lawyer about, like what is my billing on this case? What is the next major task I have to accomplish in this particular case? I think the magic will happen when Clio makes it externally facing for clients, but also this is something that you can get through LodgeWedge and other vendors where it can access the information of the case and then provide answers to clients based on that. So instead of them having to call you and get a hold of you to find what's the status of the case, which we know is a very, very common thing, they can actually self-serve. And if you wanted to control it even further, you could create your own, summaries that you have control over so that it's not it's not querying on its own and coming up with a status of information that you might not want to include in the summary, but you could provide it with a very tight focus of data from which to extract that summary. So that could be something you do yourself, or it could be something you assign to your paralegals and assistants. So we talked about, client intake and communication. Those are some ideas for using AI for that. Now, how would we use it to personalize legal services? One, which is extremely popular, and I've showed you a demonstration of that last time, is to use AI for legal research and drafting. Now, the part where it gets interesting is where you do the research of the cases, you come up with the cases, but then you give the AI a factual scenario that is your client's scenario, and then you ask it to apply the research that you found, the particular cases, to the hypothetical that you presented it with. And you don't have to, put in your client's social security number. You don't have to put in personally identifying information if you have any concern about the AI system, but you can provide it with an overview of the facts of your client's case, and then ask it to apply the case law that you found to that particular scenario. I've done this myself, and it's extremely useful in that it gives, first an overview of how the two connect, and then an actual point-by-point IRAC of how the legal issue from this particular case applies to this hypothetical scenario. And in addition to that, it's also possible to ask it to perform a certain amount of role playing. And this is something we're actually incorporating into the LawDroid platform. It was a recommendation from one of our customers, and I always love customer feedback because it leads to some great discoveries and new uses that we can employ. And the idea was that if you had a particular, argument that you're going to make to a judge, for example, that you can upload the motions that were filed with the court to that point, and then ask it to role play as a neutral judge with all of the information that's provided. What would its determinations be based upon this law? And it could provide feedback and go back and forth in kind of a Socratic style to improve your argument. That's one. Another type of role playing is where it plays devil's advocate and essentially comes up with arguments against your position that is reflected in your motion. And there's really like no limit to the different types of characters it could take on. One also might be a particular juror. If you have a company that's kind of doing a background on different jurors and their, education, their life experience, and how they might approach their decision-making process in a case, to have it role play for that effect as well, which ties into a bit of the predictive analytics for personalized case strategies. The analytics being that you can create these personas and role-playing characters to better understand how someone like this particular judge might decide a case. Customized document generation and contract management. So the customization there is where you can capture the information from a client and then use it to create a document, which is kind of good old-fashioned document generation. But I think where it gets interesting is where you can use the generative AI to ask particular follow-up questions that might be triggered from essentially the story that you're getting from the client at each step, and to explain certain concepts and to be more helpful actively during the actual interviewing process than you would in the static format. Now, you could do a lot in the static format where there's question, answer, and you can, insert let's say a minute-long video to explain a more complicated concept. You could definitely do that. But what the generative AI does is that it allows it to come up when it's relevant. The static way, you're kind of pushing it out, and it may or may not apply to this particular client. They may be up to speed. They don't really need to have that additional information. With generative AI, based upon the way the person's answering the questions and the questions they ask, you could interleave that additional information in real time. So just a more natural kind of experience for the client. Proactive notifications on relevant updates and precedents. This is something pretty cool that I saw an AmLaw 100 firm comment on. I think it was in response to the survey that I think it was Thomson Reuters, but they were pointing out that one thing that they've done is when new cases come out, they use generative AI to summarize those cases and then, you know, break it into 2 or 3 bullet points of how the client can actually take it into consideration in what they do. And so that part, the part about making it actionable, very, very useful, especially, you know, from a client standpoint. It's not just there's this law the judges decided and that my attorney is telling me about, but what do I do with this? And so they include that in their newsletter to make clients aware of these new developments. It's also a great way of remaining of creating stickiness, right? You want to have stickiness in that relationship, meaning that they need you, that you're a resource that they can come to, and they're not always going to know when they need to come to you. So like when you provide them the information that demonstrates that, it hits that trigger in the back of their head. Oh yeah, that's why I'm paying to have this lawyer, is to keep me out of trouble. So let's also think of some ideas for case and workflow management. How can we use AI in that? How can we use AI to become an irreplaceable lawyer by allowing us to focus on the human relationship we have with the client, while at the same time leveraging AI to stay ahead and outcompete lawyers that are not using it? So one is intelligent task prioritization and delegation. What is that? So one example I have of this that I use myself is it's an app called Motion. You may have heard of time boxing, where you basically break down your day into a series of time slots that are dedicated to different tasks. Cal Newport is a big, proponent of this. He's the author of Deep Work, and essentially by creating these blocks of time that are dedicated solely to specific tasks, you can allow yourself to get deeper into your work, to hopefully be able to do deep work. And I mean, the idea of deep work is that you actually, have the time and silence to get into what you're doing, not only the flow of the work, but to be able to reflect on it. That's not always the case. And like the counter of that, the opposite is probably what you all are experiencing. I know I experience it every day. And although I try to do the scheduling, there's stuff that comes up with the family if you're working from home, like I am here, that interrupts the flow of the day. There's, support calls that come up or client phone calls that come up, and at least having the discipline of creating this time boxing of different tasks for different periods of your day is important. But this intelligent task prioritization that Motion does, for example, it takes some of the work out of it because it allows your task to be reprioritized if one goes longer than it should, So instead of you having to go into the tool and then manually reapportion your day for something going long, it actually could do that for you. So that's one way to use AI to your advantage in your day-to-day scheduling. Legal research and precedent retrieval, we kind of talked about that. Automated court form completion and e-filings. Now that's pretty cool. In California, where I'm licensed, you could do e-filings pretty much now across all counties. There's 58 counties in California. And with e-filings, it opens up this possibility now of saving tons of time in not having the back and forth with, the client to get their wet signatures and then possibly scan it in if you're lucky, or mail it back to you, and then you have to scan it, and then you have to countersign it, and then you have to physically file it with the court using attorney services. That inevitably leads to they didn't pay the right fee, or they didn't get there on time, and it gets knocked back to you or rejected. E-filings makes it much more direct. If there is a problem, they let you know in detail, but at least it happens quickly so you can refile. Automated court completion is where you can actually link the two together. So you can have an AI chatbot asking questions of your client, where it gets the answers and actually fills out the forms for you. Now, I'm not suggesting that that be directly linked to e-filing, because then you might end up like Mr. Schwartz and sanctioned or something like that. You definitely want to have an interval in between where you're reviewing it and ensuring that it's appropriate, but it saves such a ton of time to be able to take in the client answers, create the work product, and have it 80 to 90% done. Now, that reach out to the client is extremely important for cementing that relationship, but also reviewing everything, polishing up the work product that's been created. And it could be outputted in a Word doc format so that it's easy for you to edit. And then you dial it in and e-file it. So how awesome is that compared to 10, 20 years ago? Continuous case progress tracking and deadline management. Again, this is kind of the reminders and follow-ups, but on steroids, where you're linking the updates that the client is getting to the progress that you're making in the case management system. So you could set up milestones to have clients informed about the progress of their case. One use case that is possible with LawDroid is something that we call a milestone bot. And essentially you have a bot that is trained in information about a particular milestone. Let's take a divorce case, for example. You have your first hearing about custody of the child, and there's going to be certain things that come up at that hearing. You can actually provide the bot with a step-by-step preparation checklist to walk the client through about what they should bring with them, how they should dress, what questions they might be asked by the court, demeanor, like all of that stuff that we would normally, have a one-on-one about. But you can actually have the bot explaining this, inserting, videos where you relate certain concepts or like emphasize certain things to be 100% crystal clear about. And so in anticipation of a hearing, either yourself or a paralegal or assistant sends an email to the client that's triggered by that milestone, has a link to the bot where you just say, hey, we have the hearing coming up on custody. I want you to click on this link and listen to what this bot has to say to walk you through preparing you for that. They click on it, and it's this interactive, education about best practices, about what they should do at that hearing. Now, we all know that we have some clients that are just not going to listen, or they're not going to click on the link, but that's kind of life. We could also provide it in different channels by email. We can also text them the link and maybe time that for a couple of hours ahead of the hearing. So like if they missed the email, you text them the link, they click on the link, opens perfectly within their on their phone, very responsive, easy for them to read, and they can go through that. So that milestone use case, I think is extremely useful and valuable. And it also, again, cuts against the issue that lawyers have a weakness on, which is communication with clients. Enhancing client engagement. So we have talked about all the ways that we could perform the work and we can communicate to the client that we perform the work, but how do we actually enhance things? One is having a virtual legal assistant for anytime client support. So kind of akin to what you see on some major corporations' websites, you would also have an AI, but even better because it wouldn't just be a generic bot that is just not knowing the answer to anything, but you could train it on your own information. And so one of the beauties of using an AI system like LawDroid, and there's others out there, but you can create a knowledge base so that you put in your own information and you can train the bot with that specific information by tying them together using the method I talked about last time called RAG, Retrieval Augmented Generation. By doing that, it stays within the four corners of that information and it can provide support to people as they inquire. Now, you probably would want to keep that, as is mentioned a little later here, within a client portal so that it's firewalled. It is only accessible to clients, and you could provide a particular bot for a particular client's case and matter that's only trained on their information so that only that client that has access to your client portal will have access to their own information and have the bot answering it. So that way, you're not sharing any information with anyone who has access to the bot. It's that particular person who's been vetted and jumped through the hoops of providing their security credentials to get access to it. Simplified explanations and legal guidance. So this goes along with the generative answers that you could synthesize from that knowledge base of information, or which could be tailored to the specific case, but it could also be that it's generalized information about your firm, the kinds of work that you do, and what your policies and procedures are. So, for example, if someone's asking if if a client is asking if they could share information with their cousin who has an understanding of some of these things, you can have your stated policy about sharing information with third parties and the reasons why you shouldn't do that, the breaking of privilege, ethical considerations, and all of that, as well as it just being a bad strategy. So that can be built in to this AI service, customer service bot that you have. The simplified explanations also being in the way that you tailor the prompting. So in addition to it answering questions, you could also say how it answers questions, right? You could indicate that it should be empathetic in the kind of answers it provides. So to meet people where they're at from an emotional standpoint, does this person sound like they're upset? Does this person sound like they're sad? Is this a sad situation? For example, if it's a probate case, that they should be sensitive, that the bot should be sensitive to these different emotional cues. So that's part of it. But also something as basic as a reading level, like instead of it defaulting to university level language, maybe we want to have it kind of put itself in the frame of providing maybe a sixth grade communication level, so that the words that it uses may be more intelligible to more people, so that the person has the feeling that it is more accessible and relatable. So there's a number of different things that you can use to kind of fine-tune the client interaction. One thing I would say that you could even go a step further than that is that Remember I said that you could have a bot for each client matter? Well, it would be possible to tune that into that particular client. So if you have one client who is PhD versus one who doesn't have a higher level education at university, you can adjust the the reading level to different settings so that it can have a more personalized approach. So like that is possible with generative AI that would not have been possible with the old good old-fashioned AI approach, which I don't want to knock because we still use it and we use them both together for greater effect. But something to keep in mind. Predictive issue detection and proactive resolution, what on earth does that mean? It could mean, number one, kind of on the front end, that there's a potential conflict, like that you can very quickly cross-check a potential new client against an existing client and see if there's a mismatch there where you have to be aware of even hiring them on or them hiring you on. Also, as you go down the road, whether or not some of the issues that are coming up in the information that's being exchanged with the client indicate that there's some other legal issue that you need to be aware of, because that may be something that needs to be referred to another attorney if you have a tight focus on the practice areas that you do. For example, if you're handling the divorce, but there's an issue that comes up in speaking with a client about their small business and what the effect would be on third parties, like their partners in that business, in going through the divorce. Well, you as the family law attorney may not be the one to advise the client about the business effects or alternate business planning and how that works out or how the math pencils out for the accountant on that. But this could be something that you identify yourself in your conversation with the client, but it's also something that having an AI trained against the facts of your case as they come in to the platform by syncing with the case data that you have in terms of could be deposition transcripts, it could be motions that you put into the system, it could be notes that you take from meetings that you have with the client, it could be recordings that you have via Zoom meetings with the client where the actual transcript is extracted. And all of that can be the basis of an AI training against, and then using it to detect particular issues that may come up. So pretty amazing that we can have the second set of eyes looking at our work product and the data that underlies that to let us know about things that we may have missed. Because we are human, even though we don't want to admit it sometimes and could make mistakes, and why not have a backstop against that? So let's look at the 5-step plan. It's pretty wordy here. Reinvent yourself as an irreplaceable lawyer with LawDroid as your AI guide. So the 5-step plan is, okay, these are all great ideas, Tom, or hopefully some, at least one of them I hope is. But how do we do this? How do we actually implement this? So step one, you need to know what you know. Sometimes we don't even know that. But assess your current practice. Identify those parts of your practice that would actually benefit from this. There might be some things that you have dialed in and are working perfectly fine on their own. You don't have to use AI in everything. Can you believe that I'm saying that? But you don't have to. Like it could be that you have somebody answering the phones and that's perfectly all right. They're doing a fantastic job and they work quickly and clients love them. Great. Don't have to change it. But there might be some things where, like reminders, for example, that is a very kind of mechanical thing that the person who enjoys that human contact and answering the phone and like giving people great experience, they might not really be into the mechanical, like reminders 1 hour before this or one day, 24 hours before something else. And then you can build in, AI to handle those like less interesting examples. So the action that you would take to achieve that objective is you need to audit what your daily tasks are, your client interactions, administrative processes. It's not sexy. It's not fun. Who likes auditing, especially when we call it auditing? But one way to do it is kind of like, I don't know if you've ever been on a diet, uh, but you can keep track of like what you eat during the day, right? Like I ate this, I ate that, and you make a little diary of what you ate during the day because it gives you greater awareness of what you're eating, when you're eating. It's extremely important to be completely transparent with yourself and honest about what's happening. It's the same thing for your law practice. Hate to say, but to be completely transparent with yourself and honest about what you're spending your time on. If you're, watching Netflix, or if you're, doing something else, write it down. Because only by kind of capturing what it is that you're doing, if you're working on a motion, if you're drafting a letter, can you get a handle on what you would need help with during your day. I think this is an especially important task for solo practitioners. I know, for myself, when I started as a solo, you do it all yourself. And you don't know what to delegate because you can hardly think about all the stuff that you're doing. So writing it down, being comprehensive, and then you can determine what to do with it, which is the next step. Your objective is to set specific goals, define clear and measurable goals of what you're trying to achieve. It could be reducing the time spent on routine tasks, increasing the volume of work that you do without sacrificing quality, or enhancing client satisfaction through faster responses. Whatever those goals are, be extremely specific. I want to take on, X amount of cases, high quality, whatever that is, within a certain amount of time, within a week, within 2 weeks, a month. Because only by writing down the specific goals can we know whether or not we've met those goals. So just like being more efficient is not good enough. We want to get down into the weeds about client satisfaction through faster responses. Well, how do we measure that? Well, we measure that by after we complete work with the client, we send them an NPS rating request to find out, did we do a good job? Are they likely to refer us to a colleague or friend? And we can even make that more specific by asking them after we've completed certain large tasks within their case. We don't want to do it after every single interaction with them, because who wants to do that? But after, like, it's, the child custody hearing, family law is a great, example. Like, do you really want to ask for feedback? But after the major parts of different steps in the case, you would want to ask them for feedback. And so how do you do it? You outline the objectives that you're trying to achieve. And then got to keep in mind that when you define these measurable goals and objectives, how does it align stepping away from the specific to the overview of what you're trying to achieve? The overall goal may be to have clients that are not only for now, but forever. And how do you increase that relationship? How do you improve that? There might be specific things that you can add into your goals to achieve that. Step number 3, once you've broken it down, what are the opportunities for using this? How do I define the goals? Well, to just dive into it and to incorporate tools that are appropriate for the use case into your practice. Like, for example, that scheduling app, if it's motion that you're going to use, that can help you to automatically time box what you need to work on. Add that into your workflow. If you're going to employ chatbots for capturing potential new client information, to add that onto your website. And also take action on it by engaging with people, your clients or potential new clients that are using it, and finding out how they're perceiving it. What is their sense of it? How can you improve it? So definitely having a dialogue where it's not just a one way of pushing tools, but also getting feedback for how effective they're being from a subjective standpoint. Obviously, when you get that, you want to be listening, but listening to hear and then to take action to improve that relationship. So we take the feedback that we get from our clients, from our potential new clients, and we refine and optimize the use case of the AI that we're using. We want to make this concrete because the feedback that we get, we want it to be through analytics and verbal or textual feedback. The analytics may be, for example, in Lodroid, if you go into the back end, there's a screen, an analytics screen. And so like when people are making choices through your automation, if they're clicking yes, or they're clicking no, or if they're giving demographic information, you have all of that pulled into the back end. So you can actually see a breakdown of how the client is interacting with the AI and get percentages. You could get percentage breakdowns about what kind of choices they're making for each step of the conversation. You can also choose different timeframes. Is this within the past week, the last 30 days? Maybe you made a change that affects how people are interacting with the AI. And to look at that and to see how those changes are altering people's behavior. So one thing I like to tell people is that when they use Lodroid, when they use AI systems, is that once you have the benefit of people using it, you can actually make data-driven decisions. It's no longer just, I feel this or I feel that, but actually that you can see through people's actual usage what their preferences are. And so very important to make decisions based on that. And to refine what you're doing based on that by altering the flow, altering the language that you're using, et cetera, to make it even better. It's not set it and forget it. It's a continuous learning cycle. And then finally, a little bit of marketing. Promote your AI first practice, right? You can use this, as many lawyers are right now, to truthfully position yourself as an innovative, irreplaceable lawyer who's leveraging AI for the benefit of your clients so that they have a better experience. They have a better quality of representation. And the actual action to do that, update your marketing materials, your website, brochures that you hand out, your social media profile, and highlight how people are benefiting from this. And naturally, people will be drawn to that because they'll see, oh, wow, that's how I already interact with my friends and family. It's so great that this lawyer is doing this in a way that feels completely natural and comfortable to me because this is what I'm already doing. This is how I already live. We have a downloadable file, the 5-step plan, reinventing yourself as an irreplaceable lawyer, with the 5 steps that I just talked about broken down with objectives and actions. Just anyone, if you can indicate on the chat, would you be interested in getting a downloadable file, PDF of this? Or, nah, don't worry about it. What do you think? Cool. Thank you, Monica. So one other step is, okay, beyond the 5-step plan of how do we employ AI, let's look at something more specific, like particular tools. How do we make these decisions amongst these different tools? If we're looking at legal research, we have to think of it in terms of its performance versus current methods, right? We can't just, it'd be crazy just to use, thank you, Herbert, for saying yes to. It'd be crazy for us to just employ AI because everybody's doing AI and it's a cool thing to do and all, want to be like the cool kids. You actually have to think of the current situation versus using AI, and if it's better, then obviously only if it's better. Same thing for document drafting, case prediction, client interaction, confidentiality, all of these things. But these are different, constellation. This is a constellation of different considerations and criteria to think about when you're considering a new tool. Score one to 5, 1 being, the worst, 5 being this is an awesome tool. Also looking at regulatory compliance, how it can integrate with your current existing systems, like if it can, and it's a native integration, like for example, us with Clio Grow, that would be a 5. Don't even need to think about it, works perfectly. Training and support, when you look at this tool, like, is it a company that just started last month? Do they have any training and support available? Probably not. So that would probably get a 1. Not so great. Vendor support, the actual adequacy of the support that you get. Is it just, a knowledge base that they have on their website? Is it actual like videos? Do they have maybe a course where they actually walk you through a multi-step process about how to understand how to use their stuff? The initial investment cost, extremely important. How much does this thing cost? Especially vis-a-vis other providers, important to get that. Ongoing expenses, self-explanatory, ROI estimation. How is this going to benefit the bottom line? So, show of hands, who would like to get a downloadable copy of this decision matrix for how to consider whether or not you want to use a new tool? Thank you, Herbert, for literally raising your hand. Appreciate it. And Monica, thank you as well. Cool. So LawDroid, we're here to supercharge your law firm with AI legal assistance. We can take you through the 5-step plan. We can take you through the decision matrix and even help you with making a decision about other products. There's a lot of great products out there. You saw the bots before that were built into the presentation. We actually have these built out to use on our platform for these specific use cases: generative answers, lead capture, and document automation. Want to highly encourage you to please follow me on LawDroid Manifesto. I have over 4,000 subscribers at this point. Would love to have you amongst us. If you haven't already subscribed, there's lots of great information. We have the podcast where I have legal innovators talking about how they do what they do, as well as these, if I do say so myself, some interesting articles about the intersection of law and technology. And if you haven't subscribed yet for LawDroid University, it is free. It's awesome. And great to hear you already have, Monica. And the faculty is world-class, great testimonials, and you have the entire LawDroid AI conference in there. There's 6 sessions, including plus the keynote, and also episodes of the podcast in there. So thank you so much. Really appreciate your time. Really appreciate you sticking with me. And next week, we're going to have a whole part 4, actually, dedicated to ethical considerations and risk management. So with that, I hope to see you next week. Take care. Have a great rest of the week. Appreciate you.